We're here at Challenge Atlantic City, Breakfast with Bob, Atlantic City edition. Our guests, Anne Thilgas and Tina Ament. How are you guys doing?
Great.
Really good. Thanks, Bob.
Wonderful. Teammates. Now, when you guys race, are you tethered? How do you guys work it, Anne?
Well, so yes, we are connected the whole race.
Okay.
During the swim, we have a bungee cord that we either goes around our waist or around our thigh. We're going to do a new practice this time. We're going to do a bungee cord around our thighs to connect us. And then on the bike, we ride a tandem bike. I ride on the front.
You're on the front.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. Don't you get to take turns, Tina? What type of garbage is that?
I'll let her have that.
Tina's the only person in the race that gets to draft all day.
Ooh, I like that. And then run tether?
And run tether around our wrists.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many times have you guys competed together?
We've competed together twice. Once we did the Atlantic City Triathlon here, which was the Mid-Atlantic Para-Tri Championships, which we won. And then we did Ironman Florida, in which we came in second in the PC division.
And you guys are going to be going to Kona to do the Ironman World Championship in October.
How cool is that?
So give me a little background. Tina, were you have you been blind since birth, or was it degenerative? What's the scoop?
That would be yes on both counts.
Okay.
I was born with a congenital eye condition that has gotten worse as I've gotten older. So when I was younger, for example, I could see the black line of the pool when I did swim team. Now I can't even see that, so I have to kind of futz with the lane lines to keep going in a straight line in the pool. And so for a long time, my parents didn't even know what was wrong with my sister and me. You know, the
your sister
genetics,
has it too.
She does, and
Yeah.
the genetics.
Is she a twin?
She's 2 years older.
Okay.
And my parents figured out not to have any more, I guess, after I came along. So really back in the 60s when I was growing up, a lot of what my parents had to figure out how to get us to be able to function in a sighted world was, make it up as you go along, because there was no ADA. My mother had to fight to get us to be able to enroll in public schools a lot of the time, and then just sort of cobble together a way to deal with, getting the accommodations we needed in school, because, nobody really knew what to do with us.
What's always interesting to me is, we think of it now, okay, what sports can we get people into? Yours was just basic living on a day-to-day basis, right? How do we make sure that Tina gets the right education and is in the right classes, right? It is a totally different world.
Yes and no, because on top of doing that, my parents also were very encouraging of us to be physically active, but there were no programs.
Right.
I mean, there was very, very little. I think there was a Paralympics back then, but we didn't really know anything about it. So my parents found a adaptive ski program for us to be in. So that's how we learned to ski. And then in terms of things like swimming and horseback riding, we just got thrown in with regular kids.
Right.
So it's just, figure out, try your best to keep up. And some of the time, that was a little demoralizing because, we also did regular gym class, which meant I really was the last person to be picked to play soccer and flag football for obvious reasons.
So as you grew older, what did you gravitate to work-wise?
I always wanted to be a lawyer. I used to watch Perry Mason starting when I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
And so I pretty much always knew that I wanted to go to law school. So in college, I dabbled around and studied a lot of different things, but I always knew it was with an eye toward going into law. And so then I went immediately on to law school after college finished.
And was sport always part of your life at this type of level, or did that come a lot later?
Pretty much. I rowed for a year in college on my college crew, and I just really didn't have the time to be a D1 rower.
Right.
And I really didn't much have the ability or the size to be a D1 rower either, so by mutual agreement, I left that. And then throughout the rest of college and law school was sort of my lazy period where I didn't do much. But after I graduated from law school, I moved to Little Rock to clerk for a federal district court judge, and he was very into sports. He tried to get all of his clerks to buy a membership at the Y, and he'd take recesses from trials to go swim. And so I sort of took up swimming then, and then when I went into private practice, I started going to the gym and working out. And after I went to work in the government and I had a little bit more time, I started competitive rowing, which I did for 10 or 11 years, and then went on to marathon running when I got somewhat bored with rowing and wanted to try something new, and then settled on triathlon when we went up to protest the blackout glasses rule that USAT had imposed on the blind athletes. So we got a bunch of people together to try to go up and protest in New York City to refuse to wear them and get ourselves disqualified, so we would all be, like, look, oh, poor them, they did a race for nothing. But the race outfoxed us and made an open division for us to race in where we didn't have to wear the glasses, so we just got to race and nobody really noticed or cared. But I got hooked on the sport. So I guess it was sort of a victory for USAT and a victory for me.
I love that. And in terms of, if you're swimming in a pool, I'm assuming you can swim on your own. And count strokes and have an idea. But when do you need a guide? Obviously on a bike.
And for running, I need a guide. There are lots of blind athletes or partially sighted athletes who can run on their own.
Right.
Usually when they know they're really getting to be blind, when it's too dangerous for them to cycle anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm really not able to. And when I was younger, I could do that. I could go and run. I lived in a block where every high school cross country team came to train in our block because we had such big hills. So I could just run like half-mile loops around our block all the time to keep fit. But now I really can't see enough to do that. It wouldn't be safe. So to run outdoors and to cycle outdoors, I need a guide. But I have a trainer, and I spend a lot of time on my trainer, and I spend a lot of time on the treadmill.
Have you had a buddy of mine by the name of Tom Sullivan's blind entertainer from up in L.A., and we've done some rides and things like that together, and he would tell me about his, the dyslexic guides who would be behind him skiing and go right, oh, no, I meant left, that type of thing. Have you had that type of thing where you've had guides?
The worst time that I ever had with that is because, as you know, when you row competitively in a crew boat, you're facing backwards.
Right.
So I had a ski guide who thought it would be really clever to say port and starboard all the time, but I'd always go the wrong way because then I was facing forward, and it was like, you can't do that anymore, dude. Like, I'm going to go
left, right. That's what we want to do. That's funny. Now, when did you guys connect, Anne?
Well, so we connected about a year ago. I have to give a shout out to someone named Carolyn Gaynor, and she's very, very involved with the team RWB, Team Red, White, and Blue, and she's very much, I'm going to say, a recruiter for blind and disabled athletes for that group. And so she was a guide for Tina, and I was living in San Francisco, but then just last year I moved to New York City, and that's how I got to know Carolyn directly. Just after I moved to New York City, Carolyn moved to Austin, so she kind of passed Tina off to me, I'll say.
Yes.
So since she was leaving, Tina lives in Washington, D.C., which is not too far from New York.
Not bad.
So that's how we got connected, because Tina was looking for a guide for Ironman Florida. And so we did, as Tina mentioned earlier, the Atlantic City race.
Right.
It was here, a sprint race. We did that one in September of last year. That was kind of our warm-up. That was the first time we'd ever met.
Yes.
And pretty much the race was our first time we ever rode together in the race. But then that gave us the opportunity to kind of get to know each other. And then we subsequently went and did Ironman Florida in November.
So, as somebody who's done 30 iron distance races, and you've been endurance athletes for how long?
I did my first Ironman distance race in '95.
Okay.
And so, did marathons back in the '80s.
Sure.
Did shorter triathlons before then. So that's about 20 years that I've been doing Ironman.
So you've been an endurance person forever.
I have. I love the lifestyle. I live the lifestyle.
Were you growing up swimming, cycling, running?
I grew up in a family that we were encouraged to do all sports, but school was definitely stressed more.
Priority,
it's kind of that. I love it when Chrissy Wellington talks about that, because then I wonder why I'm not as good as Chrissy Wellington.
Yeah.
Because she grew up in that same sort of family.
Because she's a freak.
There you go.
That's why,
But same sort of thing. We were definitely encouraged to do sport, but it was all for fun.
Right.
But then that was good. I had an exposure to lots of different sports. I would say probably my main sport was diving in high school.
Oh, wow. Okay.
A little bit in college. And but I did, all of it, softball and running and so forth. And I always really loved the running, and I still do. I do ultra distance races.
Oh.
And I've got my eye on a 100-miler in the next year or so. So,
like Western States or something like that?
Well, I haven't been able to get into that one. I've been trying.
Right.
The qualifiers to do a
Very
50
tough.
miler, and I've done that. It's harder and harder every year. But I'm looking at one. How about this? It's in Alaska in June, which means it'll be 24-hour daylight.
Nice.
So I can finish a 100 miler in daylight.
Wear your
in
shades
theory.
the whole time. Get a good sunglass
So
sponsor.
that's my plan.
Is Tina the first blind athlete you've worked with?
No, in fact, I've been able to guide. I've guided runners would have been
Okay.
first for many years, and I'll have to say actually mainly male runners.
Okay.
Not so much the female. So that's really where I got my start. And there were a couple of men that I had run with in training. There was one guy in particular we ran together for, we would run every week together because, he needed somebody to run with him.
Right.
He could never run alone. So did that. I also, living in San Francisco, I also did some bay swims. I used to coach with a group there, and so I was able to guide people for swimming, and then also separately cycling. So more recently, though, more consistently with Tina, and there's another athlete in the New York City area that Amy Dixon. That,
know Amy very well with Elvis.
Yeah, so Amy and I are going to be racing at the end of July. So I love it. I get to race with lots of different people, and it's great. So, yeah.
I love that. Toughest part about guiding? Obviously, you've done it for a long time, so you love it.
I do.
What's the toughest part?
It's tough and it's not tough. There's just a little bit more pressure to know that I cannot break down. I cannot bonk. I cannot.
Oh, that's right.
I really need to make sure that I'm able to go, let's say, just a little bit stronger than Tina, because, not only do I not want to hold her back, but I also have to be able to give her commands. When I mean right, it has, when I say right, it has to be the right.
So you can't be fatigued, and you can't be like,
Right. So that puts a little bit of pressure on me, but at the same time, it actually makes it easier. I'm not focused on myself, and so it gives me a bigger purpose for finishing the race. So in some ways, it just gives me that to focus on, so that I'm not focusing on my poor toe that might be hurting or something like that.
Now, how did you guys do at that Ironman Florida event?
We did excellently. Tina got a PR by an hour.
Wow. And how fast did you guys go?
With 13 and change.
13 and
right?
change. I like that.
Yeah, 13 and change.
13 and change. That's good. Now, you're also coached by Coach Muddy Waters.
I am.
And
I love Muddy Waters.
Little Muddy love.
Yeah, that's right. How lucky am I?
Yeah, that is really cool. And so the build up this weekend, you're doing Challenge Atlantic City, a full iron distance event, and then the build up to Kona from there. How do you? You're in New York, and Tina's in DC. How do you guys coordinate? Do you get together, do training blocks together?
We really haven't been able to do that. Anne's got another Ironman race coming up in between
Maryland.
those two.
I'm doing
my God.
Maryland.
Which unfortunately is like the week that my team is having an ocean swimming training camp, so she'll be busy. But we pretty much have ended up having to train on our own. But we'll have a week out in Kona to do the final tune-up to it, which will be great.
Nice.
To be the run-up, and including coming to see you every morning.
Exactly.
breakfast with Bob.
Love that. Well, congratulations on everything you guys have done. Qualifying to get to the big dance in Kona is awesome, and being here for the first ever Challenge Atlantic City, it's going to be pretty special because this is sort of in the hood. You guys are East Coast people now.
It is, yeah. Being able to drive to a race instead of fly to a race is great.
It's always pretty sweet. Well, thank you both for coming on.
Bob, thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
No problem. Again, Breakfast with Bob, Challenge Atlantic City, out here on the beautiful pier overlooking the Atlantic. Hold on, everyone. We will be right back.